I'm Richard Porter.
I'm Jonny Smith.
And this is On the Other Side of Things, the Smith & Sniff spin-off in which we answer your questions.
Welcome to Otosot, where you ask us questions,
Yes.
which is why it's called Otosot.
On the other side of things, now you've mentioned it, I realised that
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We get people wanting to ask questions and we get too diverted on our main podcast, so we funnel them into this one, which is simply you ask a question, we try and cobble together an answer. Done.
If you've got a question for us, hello@smithandsniff.com is the email address. If you put Otosot in at the start of the subject line, that helps us to find the questions when we need them because we're not very organised.
Yes.
Someone who's done just that, an absolutely textbook example of how to put Otosot at the top of the question line, is from Rhys Llewellyn, who's said, I noticed over the Christmas period, From A to B, Tales of Modern Motoring was uploaded to BBC Archive on YouTube. This is this sort of fly on the wall, but in this case, fly in the car series.
Oh, yes.
From the 90s. Now, we get sent this a lot.
We do.
I didn't know it had actually been uploaded to YouTube because I think it's been on iPlayer already. But yeah, a few times a week we get sent a link to this because it's brilliant. I mean, I remember watching it when it went out, and it was fascinating. The one about company cars and the snobbery of trim levels and things. And there's a guy who's been given a Maestro, like a basic Maestro, and he's so visibly crestfallen about how his life is going. I
could never work out whether it was real or not.
Oh, I think it was totally real, but because of the cameras of the time, they wanted to use proper TV-grade cameras, not sort of, at that point, probably the small cameras were not particularly good quality, so they wanted to use the proper full-quality, I guess they would be digi-beaters at that point, maybe just beaters. So to shoot the main shot of people driving and talking, they had to take the passenger seats out of all the cars and install a tripod rig.
Oh my gosh! Right.
So it was not the work of a moment, but they were real people by all accounts.
Wonder how many seats went back in properly.
Well, probably. Well, the thing is, that's not
a question.
90s, so
for this.
not much plumbing. Now you'd have to be just sort of disengaging the pressure sensor and the heated seats and the thing that does the seatbelt pre-tensioner, and it'd be a nightmare. But back then, getting the seats out of a Cavalier, probably about 2 minutes work.
Well, I got the seats out of my Boxster in about 3 minutes.
Did you?
Yeah. Really? Yeah. That's.
There's a random question.
Well, there we go.
Car seats become more time-consuming to remove? What was the year?
It would have been the chasing of the Euro NCAP and the luxury thing.
Yes. Anyway, so Rhys says, he's talking about From A to B, Tales of Modern Motoring. He says, it's a fascinating snapshot in time, much of which I was never privy to, as it was filmed the year I was born. I stuck it on over Christmas with my dad, who was at the coalface when it came to company cardom in the mid-90s.
The coalface. Yeah.
Having grown up on a gravy of Mark III Cavaliers and 406s, a 405 GTX sounds mighty appealing.
Oh, yeah.
My two questions are, what would you both have driven back in the day? Was there another option outside of the 1.6L Cavaliers and Sierras that these reps should have looked at? Mondeo, Laguna, Vectra and 406 were still some time away, so would something else catch your eye? And secondly, if Tales of Modern Motoring was reshot in 2025, what aspects of modern motoring would they look at?
Bloody hell, that's a question.
We'll go on. So what would you have driven? It's the early 90s. So it's the Mondeo and the Vectra have yet to arrive.
Okay.
What would you have had if you had to have a rep car?
Very, very early 90s. What would I have had if I had to have a rep car? I probably wouldn't be allowed an Alfa Romeo, would I?
I think your fleet manager, because that would have been, at that point, you might just have got a 155.
I was trying to think, when did the 75, what was the eras of the 75? Was that late 80s?
Yeah, it was. The 75 came in from memory, 86, I think, but it was probably gone by 92, 93, so
Imagine if you had a Busso company car. Oh
my God.
See what I mean?
But this happened to a mate of mine's dad. He was fairly senior at a market research company, and they had a fairly freestyle policy on company cars. And I remember, I think maybe he got a promotion. It had unlocked a whole new avenue of slightly more expensive cars. And I remember he test drove an Alpha 75. And I think he said if he was a single man, it's the car he would have chosen. But he didn't think it was a brilliant family car because it didn't have a lot of room in the back. And he ended up with, I think at that point, bizarrely, a Peugeot 605.
I remember the 605, yes. Because the 605 was a big 405, wasn't it?
Yes, it looked
the same from a distance.
Upscaled. And he had, and this was when the 605 was first out, so it would have been like, I think 1990, 91.
Do you know what, that with some choice options would actually be a good call for this?
It was lovely. It was a 4-cylinder auto, this 605, with very bungee velour seats.
Yes.
And it was incredibly comfortable.
Yes.
That's a good one. I don't know. I feel like though that's overreaching, isn't it? Would you be allowed a 605 if you're at the Cavalier Sierra level?
No, I think the short answer is no. You wouldn't.
It's weird, isn't it? Because the 405 would have been around then, so you could have a 405. I've had a 405, which my dad indeed did have a 405, although he wasn't a sales rep. So what I would have had back in the day is probably a 405 because they were lovely to drive.
Do you know what I would have? I might have a Mark III Cavalier V6 4x4.
I don't think you're allowed. I think it's 1.6 max.
Oh, cocks.
In sales rep world. Unless you went rogue and some kind of elaborate scam where you somehow borrowed a Cav V6 on a 24-hour test drive and did some kind of respray / plate swap.
What, stealing
and
it is what you're saying?
Well, or you did an engine swap and then just took it back to the dealership so you could have a V6 front-wheel drive Cavalier in the shell of your 1.6L company car. Or go, on a more honest way of doing it, find a wrecked Cavalier V6 and take the engine and put it into your company car at your own expense, and then accounts at your company a few months down the line asks why your fuel bills are so high.
This is hard, this question, because I need to go back. I need to get some old issues of Autocar and scroll through the columns at the back to just remind myself of all the lesser known Fiats and it would have still been a Regatta. Could I get
the
Tempera?
Tempera. Would you really want a Fiat Tempera?
I'd want a Fiat Tempera prawn. That's what I want. Yeah, that's what I want.
A Fiat Tiny Temper.
Oh, brilliant.
I wouldn't want one of those. Citroen BX are quite comfy, I suppose.
Yeah, I was actually thinking along the lines of BX because I think a highly appointed one would be pretty cool. And I've travelled in a lot of BXs when I was younger. We're dwelling on this question a lot, aren't we? Wow.
On a nice to drive, but also, if it bothers you, reliable and probably quite economical because they've got a good modern engine in them.
Primeras are really... Yeah, Primeras are good. And they would have
P10 Primera came along in 1990, so... You could...
wow. Oh, hang on a minute.
Have one of those.
Yeah, hang on. That would be far superior to most of the other cars we've just talked about, with its touring car pedigree.
Well, as you pointed out in that late break vid a while ago.
Which did much better than I expected. I really thought it was going to be an incredibly niche video, and it got more views and comments and interaction than a lot of other more predictable cars, which I was pleasantly surprised by.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
But then, and let it be known, of course, that the P10 Primera was one of the benchmarks for the Ford Mondeo, famously a very nice car to drive. But part of that reason was because Ford realised that the Primera was a very nice car to drive and wanted to beat it.
I feel like we don't say Ford enough on this.
There's a second part to Reese's question, which was if Tales of Modern Motoring was reshot in 2025, what aspects of modern motoring would they look at? Because I guess sales reps don't really exist to the same extent.
No, there would be real. I think the real competitive edge would be between wheel sizes and infotainment. Because I think people who aren't massively into cars are more obsessed with infotainment than they are engine capacity today, whereas it wasn't the case back then, I don't think.
Probably.
And the badge snobbery still exists more so than ever.
I think there's a compelling documentary could still be made about car owners clubs, and if you could really sort of embed yourself with some of those, and the kind of the politics and the rivalries and the snobbery. Well, he says it's been restored, but those are the wrong model year bumpers on that and things like that. I think you could find some really funny, interesting people. And then, also not just sort of to mock people, but also the fact that these are these sort of microcosms of society. And you could even go to like the Festival of the Unexceptional and see the fact that there's this whole generation of younger people embracing cars. In fact, the cars that were in the original Tales of Modern Motoring are now kind of retro classics. So that would be sort of one end of the spectrum, but then the other one, the kind of bit more ear, hair, and real ale kind of MGB club.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, that's the thing. Is maybe the MGB club now has got a younger contingent in it? I actually don't know, and that would be quite interesting to film as well and see the sort of whether the old guard are welcoming or a little bit sceptical about these people who are maybe not so purist about the cars. I actually don't know. So there you go. Owners clubs would be my vote.
Agreed. I got a question. It's a Jag-related question, so it's almost connected to Folds when we were talking about Folds. This is from long-time listener Tim Skipper. Tim says,
Tim.
Guys, given all the woo-ha surrounding Jaguar at the moment, good use of woo-ha, by the way, because that doesn't get used.
Woo-ha?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favourite Busta Rhymes tracks.
Is it not hoo-ha?
Well, it could be, but it's woo in this. It's written WHOOHAR in Tim's
Split
letter.
the difference and pronounce it the way that Gordon Murray pronounces wheelbase.
Hoo-ha. Well, look, it's my favourite Busta Rhymes track. No, my second favourite Busta Rhymes track. Anyway, given all the hoo-ha, woo-ha surrounding Jaguar at the moment and the apparent all-electric forthcoming models, should I buy a 3 to 4 year old facelift XF? This is what I was planning on doing early part of next year, which is today, which is now. Probs, a petrol estate, but now I'm wondering, what do you reckon? CMTM, Tim. Well, Tim, firstly, have you been tapping into my mind via Bluetooth over the Christmas period? Because I did lots of ponderings over the Christmas period and did actually buy a car or two. More on that another day. But I've thought since the Jaguar hoo-ha, more than ever, and I think I might have WhatsApped you about this, Rich, is one of my favourite modern Jags I've ever driven and looked at and just thought and tested is a XFRS estate.
Oh,
and I think it's a very rare car now, and it's only going to get rarer, but it's such a weapon of a thing. Everybody buys the fast German estates, but I think this thing is so good. I mean, your question is that we wanted a petrol estate. Well, it is petrol, and you can buy them in estate form. But and the XFR is much easier to find than the RS. But what about it, Tim? What about it? Amazing value, sweet value. What do you think, Rich?
Well, I'm slightly puzzled by Tim's question, only in as much as is he basically saying that because there's been a lot of hoo-ha around Jaguar, it's put him off buying a 4-year-old one? Because I don't really see the problem. It's like they're good cars.
They are.
They're very nice looking cars as well.
Yeah, they are.
And I think if you want it and it would bring you pleasure and utility, then why would you not get it? I wouldn't worry. I think it's one of these things where also it's easy to assume that what's happening on social media is the real world. I don't know that anyone, as you drive down the street in your very handsome Jaguar estate, is going to go, "Oh, look at that guy, he's gone all woke, I bet he wants to paint it pink because it's a Jag." Isn't going to happen.
Well, what I hope is that all this hoo-ha that's been created, hopefully, we were saying in another podcast about younger people perhaps becoming more enthused by cars and the car world. Maybe obsolete model Jags might actually gain a bit more visibility, and rightly so.
Yeah,
I've just casually looked at Jag XFRSs. There is one that's done 90,000 miles. It's yours for 21 grand.
Oh,
yes, and it looks really, really nice.
Yes, definitely yes on that one, I would say.
Our friends at Piston Heads, obviously, it's a good place to go to look for vehicles of that kind of performance. There's a couple lingering around on there. I'm not going to dwell too long because I will end up doing bad things with my wallet. So I'm not going to do that.
Tim, buy the car you want to buy. No one's judging you for it. And Tim's written us before about Jags, and he had an XJ, which I think he had to throw away in the end because it rotted or broke or something. So he's clearly got a bit of previous on the Jag front, and I wouldn't change your position on that. If you like Jaguars, then why not? I have a question here from a listener called Daniel Tilmuth. He says, "Richard, for the best driving road in the world feature on Top Gear, did James May really know what he was letting himself in for by driving that Aston around Central Europe? It looked an extremely unpleasant way to spend a few days, or was he just hamming it up?" This was we were driving around trying to find the best driving road, and James picked an Aston V8 Vantage, but basically a sort of racing car. I think it had a cage and harnesses, and it was very noisy and hot. No, he didn't know what he was. I mean, he's not a stupid man. He could have made an educated guess, but I think the full horror of it when we actually had to do the road trip only sunk in after many hundreds of miles. So no, it wasn't preordained. It was like, there's a bit where I think he had to take his shirt off because he was so hot, but that wasn't as if we'd planned that. That was just like, he was just constantly complaining about how hot and uncomfortable he was. I think we have to take my shirt off. And that was encouraged because it looked funny on telly, but no, it wasn't all a calculated thing. Same with that thing more recently on the Grand Tour, that bloody, what was it called? Crosley thing that he went across Eastern Europe in. The full misery of that. He determined that that was the car he wanted to take. The show bought it, and then it was checked over by our tame mechanic to make sure it was safe and the wheels weren't going to come off or anything. And the mechanic rang one of our team and went, "It's really slow." We were like, "Yeah, we know." And he went, No, seriously, it's really slow. Hang on, I'm going to send you a video." And a few minutes later, this video came through of him trying to max it on a local dual carriageway, and it was awful, and the sound and the lack of speed. And we had to go, this is a big problem. This could really be a problem. And James went, "No, it's fine. I think I can do this." And the horror it very quickly, as in like within the first few minutes, he suddenly went, "Oh shit, I've really fucked up here. This is terrible, and I've got to do thousands of miles in it." So, do you know what? A lot of these things that look really miserable and are very funny on the TV for that fact we've got an inkling something it might make good material, but you never know for sure until you're out in the field.
I really like James May, but I especially like the fact that he's looking more and more like a ghost in an old oil painting, and that's what and if he hears this podcast, I mean this in a nice way, James. I mean it in a nice way, but it's true. I bet you can walk into, if you walked into every stately home in the UK today, I would say, at least half of them will have a painting of James May in. At least half of them.
I know what you mean. He does have that look about him.
And James has reached a level where he could do a TV show about anything he likes these days. So I think it should be James May hunts for pictures of James May in stately homes across the world.
And now on BBC Two, oh look, it's me with James May. This week, James May's at Chatsworth House, where he's just noticed what appears to be himself in a 17th century oil painting.
Yes, he got woken up in the night by a ghostly figure of himself, tapping himself on the shoulder.
James is visited in the night by the ghost of himself and then realises actually he's just looking at the painting above the bed. It's me!
Well, yes, look... but I mean that in a nice way, James, obviously.
I've got a question here from Andrew Wells, who he says he came back to this country to visit his family from Dubai, where he lives. While in Blighty, I rented a little Renault Clio 0.9 TCE.
Oh.
I'd normally go for something a bit more cruisy, but this little Clio has ignited in me a new love of the Super Mini. Refined, limited bongs and zesty performance that's way more than you need for British roads. However, as with many new cars, it has dead steering, and while the 3-cylinder engine is a marvel, its turbo is a bit laggy, which means that without careful footwork on every upshift, you get that kind of inertia that throws you through the windscreen.
Yeah.
It got me thinking, what Super Mini would you recommend with great steering feel and a lightning throttle response?
That's a good question. As in a new one, a current on sale one.
I guess so. Yeah, that to be comparable with this Clio he rented, which I guess was brand new. And the first thing I thought of, I realised, is a car that in fact you can't buy anymore, which is the Fiesta.
Yeah, the Fiesta is well known always for its interesting body control and handling. Yeah,
I borrowed. It wasn't the ST, it was the model below the ST, the last Fiesta.
ST Line?
Sadly departed. Yes, it was. That's actually right. It was ST Line, but it wasn't an ST. And it had a 3-cylinder engine, but it was sort of warm but not hot. And I had to review it, so I took it for a nice long drive across the countryside. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure there are many cars short of 458 Speciale or a 997 GT3 RS that would be more fun to drive down this road. It was just ridiculously good.
Really?
And yeah, oh my God, it was so good. It was just, but in a sort of really where you just went, what would I, obviously you could say, I'd like the steering to be even sharper and to have more feel and all that, not electric power steering, but it's like, well, realistically, it's got to have those things. It's a modern car. Most people are buying it just because they need something sort of practical and useful to get around in. It's not a 458 Speciale. It's not sort of finely honed like a sharpened pencil to be the ultimate driver's car. It's a car that happens to be incredibly nice to drive, which is quite an achievement because it was also just incredibly good at being a normal car. So in many ways, it's more impressive than something that's, sort of properly focused on just being for driving. But yeah, it was absolutely mega, really, really good. So that, unfortunately, you can't buy them anymore, but that would be my answer.
Well, I would say, Mini is still got really good suspension,
yes.
and you can buy a base model Mini. Still,
quite often those Minis, the basic ones, are really nice, aren't they? Sort of nicer than the mid-level ones.
They are. Well, I think it's the smaller wheels and perhaps slightly taller tyres and more forgiving suspension for roads that are just ruined, and our car tax clearly doesn't contribute towards any of their upkeep. And also, another car to consider, which I like a lot, is a Kia Picanto.
Oh, yeah.
Because that has a 3-pot and it's really playful. It's a very playful car. And I think the Hyundai 110, obviously the same kind of car, is one that you should also consider. Because I had so much fun in the Picanto Trials car that we built, even before we started dicking about and unbolting parts and adding others. It's such a good car for the money, and it feels genuinely well built too, but not in a heavy, doesn't feel heavy, just feels substantial. So there's still great little cars out there, and I'm really glad that the last couple of Otosot letters have highlighted that, because we all tend to gravitate, I think, towards bigger, more luxurious cars, and we forget that there's a real spark to Spartan cars.
Did you see a couple of weeks ago the boss of Gear UK actually said, we're going to keep selling the Picanto for as long as they can?
Good.
Because a lot of other people are bailing out of small cars, particularly very small cars. There's what he's sometimes called the sub-B category. And the Up's gone, the C1 is gone, the 108's gone. It's
the Igo's only one, and the Igo X is trying to make it more macho than it really is, isn't it?
It's all right, actually. I drove that when it first came out, and I thought it was quite nice. But I think the Picanto is a bit more fun.
Yeah, the Brian Canto.
There we go.
Absolutely.
Yay for small cars.
Yeah, absolutely. This is 2025, the year of the small car. Please. Right, I've got a letter, and it's right in front of me, and I'm not afraid to shout about it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Guys, this is from a chap called Simon Horton. I've recently been doing some work with fellow YouTuber Ashley Neal on driving an EV to advanced levels. That did get us thinking about the driving test and how it will have to change, or should change, to accommodate EV drivers. Given Jonny's heroic tillering of the land barge Eagle Quest in a crosswind compared to Richard in the 2424 Tesla, very different experiences and skills. What skill that you acquired as young drivers do you think is a lost art now with all the driver aids, and what new skill do you think drivers need to acquire to demonstrate competency in an EV? Ooh. Well, I mean, I haven't got a lot to... All I would initially say, Simon, is that irrespective of whether it's an EV or not, I mean, EVs tend to be slightly heavier for the size of the car because of the batteries that we know about. Driving in the kind of conditions we've got in the UK right now, I think so many drivers are clueless as to how to adjust their driving style for ice and possible snow / slush. And it's that whole idea of the response to your inputs is delayed, and you've got to be much, much softer on braking. Possibly, when it's really icy, get rid of the regen braking. I don't know. But
it is a matter of technique. I quite like the regen braking in slippery conditions, because as long as, and depending on how the car is calibrated, because they're all slightly different, being able to shed some speed, it's only the same as engine braking, isn't it?
I suppose it is.
Internal combustion car. But very gently lifting off and letting that part of the car lose speed for you rather than touching the brakes. It's part of the technique. But it is only like engine braking, so it's just, and it's like in slippery conditions, it's all about just being really delicate and not being a knobhead. And particularly, and I suppose, because there are quite a few four-wheel drive EVs around, that not thinking that four-wheel drive makes you invincible.
Completely.
Because you can accelerate harder because you've got 4 contact patches working for you, but your braking is only the same as everybody else's, because it's those 4 contact patches that are going to slow you down. It's I don't think there are that many different skills. Don't be a knobhead is a very, very universal thing to be taught. But I suppose the skills that maybe we had when we were younger and first started driving, maybe a lot of that relates to the fact that you were sort of trying not to get yourself grievously wounded in cars with incredibly skinny tyres. So it was learning to sort of go to the edge of grip without going over it.
Yeah.
And also knowing there was no stability control there to save your arse. And now, certainly in a new car, there's loads of grip, particularly in the dry, because tyres are incredibly sticky and they've got a lot wider. But also there are things in the car and fundamentally cars are probably just a bit better handling. And so you don't necessarily, but perhaps that makes you a bit careless, and it gives you a sense of invincibility that we didn't have, because you knew in a car on 155 tyres that it was going to go pretty quickly if you overdid it.
Yeah.
And you don't get that sense so much anymore. But
no.
I don't know.
I think it should be mandatory to drive on motorways as part of your test. And I think it should be mandatory to go on a skid pan.
The reason that's not part of the test is because it's not fair on, say, people in Cornwall,
where they don't have a motorway, Rich, yeah.
Or certain parts of Scotland, or even some bits of, I suppose, Wales and East Anglia. They don't have any motorways, so you can't enforce it because they don't have the place to go and try out these skills.
Well, then just have a look at the person, and if they look and seem like a moron, then fail them. And then
more from Chief Examiner Johnny Smith next week. I do wonder in this day and age where you can easily summon up some kind of simulator, even if it's just on a laptop, that there should be some motorway driving testing, and it's basically just lane discipline and not tailgating.
Yeah, it's mirrors. Again, it's really mirrors and just anticipation, and it's actually the easiest form of driving because it's nearly always very well lit and policed.
Yeah, but it is also the one that because of its easiness, people seem to switch off a bit and they're not paying attention.
Yeah,
and if they did, our motorways would work better because people wouldn't be blocking the way by being in the wrong lane and generally driving like knobheads. Anyway, on that slightly sensible note, we can bring this into a halt. But if you've got a question for us, it's hello@smithandsniff.com. And we will do more question answering next Friday. Normal show on Monday. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.